Everybody, and welcome to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. So glad you could be with us today. My name is David Yost, and I'm happy to have Robert Woodman with us this morning.
Thanks
for being here, Robert.
It's great to be back on again.
Great.
Really looking forward to it.
Well, a lot of you may know Robert. He's been managing sort of the tree and shrub area out at our Gainesville location. If you have not been out to that store, then you certainly should take that opportunity to go out there. Be a chance to meet with Robert, and of course there's all kinds of neat things and interesting things out there that we don't have available to our other locations.
We got a lot of things. In the cafe, I have to say, really good food.
Yeah, exactly. I make a point to visit that when I'm out there, and of course, like I said, we've got a little bit of a wine shop going on there. I know sometimes even had some art displays. You got the dog park, all the neat stuff's out at the Gainesville store.
You should come out and see us.
Well, I'm going to try to do that more often. But it's so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
Debbie's out of town spending some time with her family. She'll be back with us next week, but I'm sort of trying to fill in her absence. So again, thanks for being here. Now, Robert, you've kind of got some neat things in store for us today. What's the plan?
I'm going to be talking about attracting birds and butterflies into the garden, getting some interest that way, and what kind of plants will do it.
Yeah, that's always a nice added benefit to having a garden.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and of course later in the program we will be taking your phone calls, so we look forward to hearing from you. If you have any kind of comments or gardening questions or just ideas that you want to share, we look forward to hearing from you. So first of all, I think we want to talk a little bit about gardens, not just from the perspective of providing us pleasure and enjoyment, but their role as far as providing habitat for the wildlife.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, these days we're being told more and more to use gardens as a conservation area in some respects. You know, our gardens, and particularly in this area where we're living close to a city, they act as green corridors for the wildlife to be able to move from the cityscapes into the more sort of country areas. So it's these valuable corridors that help them move around quite a bit.
They are, and like saying, it's no mystery that we continue to lose that natural habitat for them as development increases.
Yes,
and so our gardens become increasingly valuable in that role.
Yeah, I mean, more and more people, they say, I remember when this area was nothing but farmland, and you look at it now and it's all just developments. So our gardens do play quite a crucial role, and we do have a little bit of a responsibility to be able to give back to nature and be able to provide some of the food plants that unfortunately developments have taken away. So it is a critical thing.
Right. And I know we're both friends of what Dr. Talmy has been teaching all of us for years here, looking at our gardens as a habitat.
Yeah, I mean, his website and his book, Bringing Nature Home, was definitely groundbreaking for me. It definitely changed my perception of what a garden should be and how to look at things. One of the things that gardeners are always looking at is whenever we get a pest or a certain insect on our plants, we run in, grab that pesticide and start spraying. But if we just hold off and let nature do its thing, often the birds come along and just pick off those little bugs. But it's definitely interesting. What I did find interesting with Doug's book is that our native trees are very beneficial in terms of being able to provide for wildlife. One of the things that he did talk about was the food chain. How the birds particularly feed off of the insects in the trees. He did mention that oak trees, for example, can support anywhere up to 534 different types of butterfly and moth, which sounds like a lot, but it's often the birds are picking them off either as a caterpillar or as a butterfly and moth and feeding on them. In return, they are then taking them back to the chicks in the nest, which then feed off of those too. So you've got this constant cycle of food plus predation. But he did mention that Norway maples, I mean, that's kind of a gardener's dream tree in some respects. Because it never gets any pest problems, but there you have a big problem that it doesn't feed our wildlife. It doesn't provide as a host for caterpillars or other bugs to feed on. So it's a very invasive tree in some parts of the country, and it definitely is taking away and affecting other ecosystems at the same time. And also our invasive plants like kudzu and bamboo, which can outcompete any of our own native plants. So again, there's nothing that really feeds on them, so it's not beneficial. It becomes a sink in some ways.
And I think he did a fantastic job where he really shows that connection between how important it is to have native plants, so we have the native food sources, so we have the insects that all support the wildlife that depends on those. So like I said, it's an important message. But you also, like, I know that you've got a young family at home that you're starting, and it's also a great way to engage the children.
Well, as soon as you introduce movement into the garden, whether it's a butterfly fluttering around or a bird coming down to a feeder, you know, straight away kids are going to start engaging with the garden. And one of the things which we were fortunate to have earlier in this year was Dr. Alan Armitage come by our Merrifield Fair Oaks location. He talked about how important it was that we started getting children and kids engaged in the garden so that they don't lose out on what we enjoyed as children. So having them see the bugs, the butterflies, the birds, hopefully that's the gateway for them to start getting interested in the garden and hopefully put down all those electronic devices that we all seem to be hooked on these days. So it's definitely something which I'm encouraging as much as I can.
Good. Now, I know you brought along a few pictures to kind of illustrate how we really make all these pieces start to fit together.
Yeah. I mean, let's actually just start off with the first picture, which is actually one of our own native American dogwoods. And one of the things that Doug was very good about communicating was you know, just our native trees are in peril for various reasons. And this is a dogwood, which is actually a food source for over 40 different types of migratory birds. So it's very important for them to have this because they have a very high fat percentage inside the berries. Now, fat for them isn't like for us. You know, fat is energy which they can use to then migrate on to where they need to go. So it's important for them to be able to have access to the berries. And unfortunately with anthracnose, which was an introduced disease, we're seeing it decimate a lot of our native dogwood stands. And the same thing also with two other trees that we used to have in our woodlands. The American chestnut, I mean, that was a huge one, took out about, they think or estimate, about 4 billion trees, which is about 25% of your forest canopy. And it was a major food source for a lot of animals. And then you got the American elms as well, which unfortunately to try and control Dutch elm disease, they used a lot of DDT to control the beetle spreading, but it also affected the bird population.
Right, and like I said, I know that we love the flowers and the color and all the things that trees bring to ourselves, but then it's also the insects that these plants support. Yeah, and like I said, we think of insects as being a pest, but just like we were talking about last week, there's a lot of really beneficial things that go with having insects in the garden. Yeah,
do we have time that we can do?
Yeah, we'll hit those real quick.
Okay, real quick on the pictures, we got the bush cricket. Big old tasty green bug, which the birds really like. I mean, it's quite a sight when you see one of these. And then on the next one is a milkweed bug, which this was all over my milkweeds at home. But again, I didn't feel tempted to go out and spray them. I just let Mother Nature take control and deal with it.
Yeah, so it's those insects that provide the protein, and then they really need that protein for them to reproduce and lay big healthy eggs and stuff. So a healthy garden is going to have insects in there. All right, well, we're going to take a quick commercial break right now, but when we come back, we're going to look more at how you can turn your garden into a habitat for birds and butterflies. Welcome back, everyone. Robert Woodman's with us here today and sharing some ideas and thoughts about the importance of using our gardens to create habitat for birds and birds and butterflies.
Birds, butterflies, hummingbirds, moths, you name it, anything that flies.
Absolutely. All right, so where do we begin?
Well, next let's talk about birds. What do we need to create the habitat for birds? And the big thing is there's actually 4 of them. You've got to provide a source of food, you know, whether it's plants or something that we pot out. Water source, definitely critical once we start getting into these summer months where it gets very dry. A place for cover, because birds will also be predated on too. And then also a place for nesting. And as you can see in this picture, feeders. You know, pot out a feeder, fill it up with seed. It's always a good thing to keep them coming back. It's providing a dinner table into the gardens, which, if we can come back to the desk, we got one of our types of bird food that we carry at the store. Very high quality food, this one, which is kind of a mix of various different things, I believe. Yeah,
I know this particular one, the Blue Ribbon blend, they formulated to attract the greatest variety of birds. So they make a lot of different mixtures. but this particular one is for the big diverse group of different birds.
Yeah, and it's surprising just, what birds will go after what kind of seed. My favorite is always the black oil sunflower seed. I get in a big mix of different birds, and they always love it, and they visit the feeder all the time. It can be a bit messy, but what I typically do is put a large pot underneath the feeder, so that as they're taking the husks off of the seed, it just drops straight down, and you can control the spread of the debris. But you can also get sunflower hearts, which are already pre-husked. It costs a little bit more because someone actually has to stand there and take the seed, the coating off. But no, I'm only joking on that.
I think they got a machine to do that.
Yeah, they probably do. But for people which don't want to have things like, say, sparrows or starlings, the bully birds into the yard, you can use safflower flower. See, I'm always getting my tongue-tied on that one. But that's a good one because it is a little bit bitter. So there's a lot of birds that don't like it, but there's a lot of birds that still do like it. So,
and I wanted to make just one comment with the Cole's bird seed and everything, because it really is a premium quality blend. We've been through several different suppliers of bird seed, but one of the things that we kept happening is sometimes they get these meal moths and weevils and bugs with them. The Cole's bird seed is very clean. They treat it all with nitrogen to make sure any of those pests are out there. Since we switched over, we've never had that problem. It costs a little bit more, but I tell you, it's well worth it because it's, like I said, very clean, pure, fresh, and we never have problems with those little pests in there.
It is an excellent product. I use it at my house, and it always brings in a good amount of birds into the feeders.
Right, but again, when we're putting the bird seed out, that's really to supplement their diet.
Yeah, this time of the year you don't need to really give them too much. There's only two types of birds that you do have to sort of supplement. Goldfinches is one, and they like the Niger or thistle seed, and hummingbirds is your second one. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what we can do is definitely pot out some of the feeder plants, or the bird pantry of plant material. Have some berry material so they can mix up their diet somewhat, not necessarily rely on this. This time of the year we want them to go hunting and look for things. But this is a different kind of dogwood right here. This is the gray dogwood, or Cornus racemosa. And this is actually one of the ones which does have a very high fat content. In some studies they found that over 93 plus types of birds will come and feed off of these berries, or any of the dogwoods I should say. So it's a valuable source for a lot of birds to feed on and come into the garden. The next one, and we all know this one, the hollies. What's nice about this guy is that the berries persist on these trees and bushes for a very long time. They typically start producing fruit in about fall period, and they can go all the way through into the winter months. And the birds slowly peck them off. You can see here a robin getting a good meal on this one.
Yeah, I've noticed that sometimes when the berries ripen up, the birds would just descend on there and just clean every little fruit off of there, all in the period of a few days.
Yeah, I mean, at the garden center we're normally swamped with eastern mockingbirds, just picking those off and having a great old time. So it's always nice to be in the garden center at that time of the year just to look at the bird life and see who happens to be visiting. My next one is actually a tree, which you see it around, but it should be more and more popular these days. This is a black gum, one of our native trees, Nisus sylvatica. What they found is it's one of the first trees to actually start changing color in the fall period. It would be the first one to actually have those oranges and reds popping out. What a lot of people think is that it's doing what's called foliar flagging. So as the migrating birds are coming across, they can see where these trees are in the forests and the woodlands, and be able to land and feed off of the berries which the tree is producing at the same time.
Oh, it's interesting. I'd never heard that before. I just love it for the form and the fall color. I had no idea that was a beacon to the birds out there. Yeah,
the other really interesting thing is that the flowers are a very heavy nectar producing flower. So you get a lot of insects going to this tree, feeding off of the flowers, which again, there's your food chain in action. The birds can feed off of those insects as the insects are going in for a meal. So you've got this constant cycling of food going on inside these trees. And it also provides great cover and nesting places for the birds as well. So it's kind of like a motel with a buffet and everything all tied into one. So they can all hang out inside this tree and create a great habitat. My last one, actually, of plants that birds feed off of, viburnums. There's so many that I could have discussed. It's always hard to select out the best ones, but viburnums are one of my favorites. It's a very versatile shrub, almost into a size of a small tree on some of the cultivars. But they produce berries, which are often really rich reds to blues, blacks, pinks. You get quite a range of different colors on those, and they've got a very, very high fat content, and they persist for quite a long time. But what we do always need to provide for birds is water, which, if we can see that slide right there coming up. Oh,
yeah,
I guess
so we gotta have the shelter you're talking about. So we have the food out there, and like I said, water.
Yep, providing water for the birds, always essential. They need a place to come drink and also bathe, cool down, particularly on a hot day. They like to jump in there and just splash it around. But we do also need to provide some nesting materials. And one of the cool things you can do with your old suet feeders that you're not going to be using once you get into the spring season is just fill it up with things like dryer lint, cut up pieces of yarn, things like that. So the birds can pick those off, take it back and make a nest out of it. And we see it actually at the garden center in some of the plants and the trees where they've picked up pieces of string that sometimes the bushes that we get in are all tied up with, and they're making nests out of them. So they're probably the original recyclers.
Oh yeah, that's a neat idea. I'm thinking I'm always just throwing the lint out and put it to good use.
Yeah, definitely use it in that way. But we also need to be aware of where we pot our bird feeders and things like that. And one of the big causes of bird deaths that they found, and actually it's surprising, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did a survey, and they found that over 1 million birds die because of bird strikes on windows. So we always need to make sure that we have feeders away from windows. You can have them as close as 3 foot or over 30 foot away, but nothing in between, because if they get spooked, they sometimes fly straight towards the windows to avoid capture.
Right, so these are obviously decals that were pasted on the window to try to deter the birds.
Yep, make them fly in a different direction so they know there's a solid thing there.
Absolutely. Okay, well, those are all good points. We're going to have to take a break, but stay with us because we got more fantastic ideas for you when we come back. Okay, well, Robert Woodman's here with us today, sharing ideas of how we can make our gardens inviting to birds and butterflies, and we're just going to continue talking about birds.
Birds, yeah, well, the next group to really move on to, after the regular birds, is our hummingbirds. As quick and as small and as darting as they are through the sky, it's sometimes hard to actually see them until you actually, one buzzes right up to something and you go, oh, there it is. But we've only really got the one type of hummingbird in this area, but it's very nice to have him. I believe it's called the
ruby-throated.
Yeah, ruby-throated hummingbird. And I get quite a few of these in my own garden. But if you do want to attract these guys into your garden, you do have to provide food to keep them coming back. They do migrate south for the winter, and then they come back up to their sort of known areas. So you always need to provide food and keep it out there for them to come and visit. So having the hummingbird feeders is definitely a must. So that they can come in, but you do also need to make sure that you're cleaning these guys. I mean, that's just a great little picture. When I was doing the seminars, stumbled across this picture online, and I thought that was a great little kid thing. Instead of playing computer games, there he is sitting out there with the hummingbirds. But I got to say, he's extremely patient. If I think about my son or daughter sitting still for long enough for a bird to come up, it's going to be a surprise.
What's with the helmet? Is that to protect him from the hummingbirds, or just
you just never know?
Fun?
I think he's just having fun. It's something that I need to make for myself. So it'd be a lot of fun to have out there.
Yeah, I do. I know I put the hummingbird feeders out because sometimes I don't want to deal with the mess of the bird seed and everything, but the hummingbirds, it's so easy and fun. And like I say, as long as you keep that nectar fresh and change it, I'd say like every third day or so, every 2 or 3 days,
definitely
they will find it. They will come around.
I mean, we don't want it getting so funky that we end up giving them a disease. So make it as fresh as you can. It always feels weird to throw it away, but it's definitely necessary for the health of these birds. And we don't want to damage them or make them ill because of it.
But just like we were saying with the other birds, we put the feeders out to supplement their diet, and so we can enjoy them. But the real key to this is having the right plants in your garden.
Plant life, yeah, the nectar-producing plants, which the next slide, this is actually one I have in my own garden, Aesculus parva, or the red buckeye. Great plant, native plant. You don't see it in a lot of landscapes, but it does a phenomenal job of drawing them in. I've had hummingbirds now on my tree for the last 3 years since I planted it, and they come back every year faithfully, feed off of the flowers. It does take quite an eye to spot them because at first you just think it's a bird flying past, but then you start noticing them hovering around, just drinking on the nectar. It gets the name buckeye actually because the seeds are kind of a dark chestnut brown, just like a buck's eye or a male deer's eye. So that's where it gets its name, but it's a cool tree. And then a couple of other natives that we have. We got the cross vine and trumpet vine in the next slide. This is actually the trumpet vine. No, sorry, actually I'm wrong. Cross vine on this one. And you can see those tubular flowers, bright red, and that's so the hummingbird can get its beak right in there and get down to where the nectar source is. They often go for those trumpet-like blooms and really feed off of those.
Yeah, and that's an underused plant. I recommend that all the time when people are looking for vines and you don't have the problems with it being so invasive and aggressive as some of the others that we use.
Yeah, it's a great little plant, it really is. And then we've got hyssops, or the agastache in the next picture. Yeah, apart from attracting in hummingbirds, it will also attract in butterflies. So it works as a double duty type plant. So it's a great little plant to have in the garden. Loves hot, dry locations.
Exactly, tough, durable, easy to care for.
Yeah, and you can almost now get it in a rainbow of colors. You know, you can get the purples, blues, yellows into almost like an orange color. So it's really an exciting perennial to have out there, and it just keeps on giving. So
yeah, but like I say, it's that tubular shaped bloom that you can see is really designed for for the hummingbirds and butterflies.
It is. And the last slide in the food group for the hummingbirds are the salvias, which are definitely an obvious one. Bright red flowers on some of those. They do just a wonderful job of attracting them in. Which I've actually got one right next to me, right here. Let's bring it out so we can see it. This guy, if we can get to the table, this is actually called Salvia Hot Lips. Love the name of it, Hot Lips, straight away. But the flowers actually start off kind of a red color, and then as we progress through the season, you start seeing a little bit of white coming into the bloom, and then it does turn back to red for a period as well. So you see kind of a change in flower color on this one. But the hummingbirds love it. It does an excellent job. It is marginally hardy. Sometimes you can get away and it comes back like a perennial, but other times you treat it as an annual, and just have plenty of color for them to come in and feed off of.
Good. Yeah, and like I say, there's so many varieties there and colors also to choose from. So again, there's so much we have to talk about, but we're going to move on, even though we love the hummingbirds, and switch gears and talk a little bit about butterflies. Butterflies,
yeah. I mean, this is definitely every children's favorite. I know my daughter loves them. My son's beginning to. He's in that age now where he starts chasing after them. But to be able to produce a habitat for them, we do have to provide a few things for them, which a lot of times you have to have the gardens out in full sun. You need stones for them to bask on to warm up in the mornings. You have to have all-season color and big blocks of color as well so that they can see where the food is. And again, just like with the birds, we have to provide something for them to drink. So water in a very shallow dish with some rocks in there. They don't like sitting in the water like the birds do, but they need something to perch on so they can drink from it. But the big thing about getting butterflies into the garden is that we have to provide a place for their juvenile state, the caterpillars to live in. And this is always the hard part again. You see a caterpillar chewing on your plant and you want to go and spray it and remove it straight away. And you can see here on this one, this is actually a black swallowtail caterpillar on a fennel. But the butterfly itself is beautiful, so trying to remove that from feeding on your plant, you're actually sacrificing the butterfly coming into your garden later on, which is what ultimately a lot of people want.
Right, and I know, like myself, I plant fennel in my garden. I don't even really like fennel that much. I plant it for the butterflies, for the caterpillars, as you said.
Yeah, and Queen Anne's lace, rue, things like that. And also, the milkweeds, the asclepias, which we saw in the previous slide with the orange flowers. It's a very popular choice for the monarch butterflies. The caterpillars will mostly feed off of that one.
Right, so again, plant it and they will come. So it all begins with the plants. All right, well, we're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, we've got more suggestions for you, what you can plant in your garden to attract butterflies. One of our beautiful viburnum flowers there.
They're great plants in our landscape.
Absolutely. Now we're talking about how to bring butterflies in your landscape. We were just talking about the importance of providing plants for the caterpillars to feed on, being careful with the use of pesticides and so on, because if we don't have any caterpillars, we don't have any butterflies. But of course the real attraction is the butterflies, and I think you've got some ideas of how we can provide for them.
Yeah, I mean, butterflies, I once read in a book, they describe butterflies as being flying flowers. So it's always a good thing to try and provide the food sources for them to come into the garden. One of the things that we often get asked is what kind of plants or flowers attract in a lot of butterflies. And it's pretty easy to figure out. You actually, once you start learning what they need, then you can choose the flowers. And one of them is this guy right here, the chrysanthemum. I should call it leucanthemum. I can never say it. Leucanthemum. The Shasta daisies. It gives them a great little landing platform to get down on. They're very clumsy flyers. They're not as agile as our hummingbirds. So they need a landing pad and something which they can grab onto as they come down. But that's just one of the choices that you can use.
And like you're saying, the nice part of this is the center part, this yellow part, is actually a cluster of many flowers put together. So like I said, being clumsy flyers, this gives them a place to sit, hunker down, and they can feed on many of them.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to be this guy. You've also got things like coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, sunflowers, and asters. All of those in the daisy group are popular choices.
But any of these composite blooms are going to be a nice addition for the butterflies.
Yeah. The other ones are these clustered type flowers, which you can see here on this verbena. It's a great little plant for them to come and again land on. There's multiple flowers for them to drink from, and they've got places where they can rest as they're feeding. And again, you've got several different plants that you can look at that have the same kind of clustering. The yarrows, milkweeds, Joe Pye weed. They're all great plants to have that type of bloom where they can rest and sit on.
And these are all different bloom times because you want to have these flowers available throughout the whole season.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you have to plan out your bloom times to make sure there's always a food source in the garden for them to come and visit.
And if you do this, I think you got some pictures to show us what we can look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, probably the ultimate plant for any kind of butterfly is this one, the butterfly bush, Buddleia. It does cause a little bit of a dilemma because it is considered in some parts of the country as invasive. At the same time, it is a major food source for a lot of our butterflies, and a lot of those happen to be endangered. So it's kind of a dilemma as to whether or not you should use them. But there are a lot of newer cultivars now which claim to be seed sterile. And they stay smaller, and as long as you're keeping up with deadheading and not allowing that plant to go to seed, then you can control its spread and not letting it get out too much.
Right, and that's what I always recommend is people just be attentive to deadheading because it keeps a repeat flowering, so we enjoy it more and it prevents the seeds from spreading about.
And these types of blooms are the spike blooms, similar to what you saw on the hyssop that we covered in the previous section, penstemons. All of these again are great flowers for butterflies to perch on, land, and feed. And feel protected. You can see in the next picture, that was actually a painted lady on that one, but on this one, this is your monarch. Probably one of the most well-known butterflies I think that we have in our gardens. The other thing which I really like with Buddleias is their fragrance. They do have a really nice fragrance, very pleasing. Just driving in today with one in my car, it was a wonderful smell inside the car to have. So it brought back a lot of memories for me. The next picture is a yarrow, and you can see that clustered flower cap, which you could call it. It's again a nice landing pad for something to land on. This is actually a small copper, which is sitting on there just having a good feed. And they come in quite a wide range of different colors. You can see on that picture there's white, but we've got several in the studio which are pinks to almost a deep pink, almost a red, and then you get yellows as well. But then also butterflies like larger flowers, and in the next picture you can actually see a tiger swallowtail. It looks like he's being engulfed by the flower, but he's found a nice perch to land on, get some safety, and get in there and really have a good feed off of it. But daylilies, hollyhocks, other kinds of lilies, hibiscus, very popular for that same reason. They can land on the bloom, get their footing, and then go in for a meal. And then, of course, the last one, Monardias, that's another popular choice. We can't talk about butterflies and hummingbirds without mentioning this guy, the hummingbird moth, which a lot of people think is actually a hummingbird when it visits the garden. It is actually a moth that doesn't need to land. It can actually hover just like a hummingbird and drink from the flower at the same time. But it's a nice one to have out there in the garden. Definitely introduces that element of movement that we often need.
All right, now we keep emphasizing it's all about the plants because that's our interest, but there are other ways to provide for butterflies and moths.
Yeah, I mean, they don't just need flowers to feed off of, they do actually go after a lot of unusual foods, and you'll see this with the next picture. Just putting out a plate of old fruit. In they come and they just start feeding off of the sweet juice that basically comes off of it. I've also heard that watermelon does a phenomenal job of attracting them in. And how many times do we go out and buy a watermelon and then scratch our heads wondering what to do with the leftovers? You know, pot it out for the butterflies. The birds will also come in and feed off of it too. So it is a great little addition to pot out there. Also, the other type of butterfly, I should say, or moth, is our giant silk moths that we have in this country, particularly on the northeast coast. And right here you can see a Luna moth, which is one of the biggest moths that we have. And what's interesting with this guy is that they only live for a very short period. They don't have any mouthpieces. Their sole purpose once they hatch or come out of metamorphosis and turn into a moth is just to mate and lay eggs. So they're only around for a very short time. Right here we got the Cecropa moth. And you can see the caterpillar right there in the top corner of the screen. They produce a very large moth, which is exciting to see in the gardens, and definitely a treat when you do see it. But they are on the decline, and it's mostly because of controls for gypsy moth, spraying the trees. They have knocked out the population, so providing a safe haven for them to live in is essential. And they are picky eaters. They do need to feed off of our native trees. So having introduced trees isn't really going to cut it for them.
Good, and I think there's that one last picture, if we have that, still have that.
Yeah, there we go. That's its cocoon, and you can see kind of why it's called a silk moth. Spins that web around, and what often happens is that drops down into the leaves that fall during the fall. Another issue that we have, we all like to get out there and clean up the leaves from the bed, but what we've got to be careful is that we're not removing the cocoons that might have fallen into the leaves and are sheltering down for the winter.
Absolutely. Well, I've got to come out and see your garden, Robert. I'm envisioning dryer lint, watermelon rinds, leaves lying around. But like I said, it may not be the tidiest look, but it's a fantastic habitat.
It's a wildlife garden, loosely.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we're going to be taking your phone calls when we come back for commercial breaks. So if you have any questions or comments or things you want to share with us, please give us a call. That phone number is 703-387-1046. We'll see you in just a minute. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. We're opening up the phones, so if you have any questions or comments, please give us a call. And I've lost our phone number there. Hopefully it's on the screen. Good. 703-387-1046. And we've got our first caller, which is Richard calling in from Colesville. How are you doing today, Richard?
I'm doing fine, David, and thank you for taking my call. It's good to see Robert back on the set. It's very knowledgeable. On my favorite, I have my backyard certified by the Wildlife Federation as a wildlife for wildlife activities. So I'm very much interested in what he was saying.
Oh, well, thank you.
Cool.
On the other hand, this morning my question is for you, David, because last fall you told me my orchids were not blooming because they did not get the cold weather in the summer or late fall before I brought them in.
Right.
How should I treat them? They're still in the house and they're under lights, but what should I do with them?
To me, the easiest way to provide that kind of temperature change is to move them outside during the summer months. Now, that doesn't mean it's the only way, but what I like to do is take the orchids, I put them out indoors on a bright but filtered light, not getting any kind of direct sun, And because just like right now, this time of year, right, we're still having 60-degree temperatures at night, you know, and then going up to sort of like 75 degrees during the day. So putting them outside in that environment, they'll get that natural temperature shift. Your only other choice is if you have a room somewhere in your house. Like in my previous home, I used to grow a lot of orchids. I had a cold, drafty room, and the temperatures really would shift 10, 15, even 20 degrees between day and night. And I could actually get them to rebloom inside my house. But most of us don't have that kind of environment, and so putting them outside and then bringing them back indoors towards late summer, early fall will give them that temperature change.
Okay, I'll do that, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Always good to hear from you.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Okay. And let's see, we've got our next caller in the line. I think was that Lois? Good morning. How are you doing today, Lois?
I'm good.
Good. How can we help you?
Ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Okay, just...
Okay, talk now?
Oh, yeah. You're on the air. We'd like to hear from you.
Okay, good morning, because I have my TV down so I can't hear.
Okay. So how are you doing today? What can we do to help you?
Okay. Good morning. They're still talking, so...
Yeah, you need to ignore your TV and just talk to us.
Oh. I have 2 dogwood trees that have red life on the tops of them, on the branches, but the leaves are actually growing from the very bottom. What should I do?
Now, what did you say? There was red? Did I hear something?
The dogwoods have life on the top of them because the twigs are all red.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions?
But the leaves are actually growing up from the bottom.
So is the top part of it dead? Has it sort of declined downwards on the tree?
It doesn't look dead. It looks alive to me. The tree they both look alive to me because red is on all the little branches.
Okay, so it's on the branch, not the leaf itself.
But the leaves themselves are growing from the bottom, from the very bottom up.
Okay. I would, if you can, bring us in a sample so we can get a clearer picture of what you have in the garden, what might be going on. If it's a tree and it's showing some discoloration in the foliage, potentially it might be under a little bit of stress. You know, it's a very hot, dry year last year. We're seeing as trees are beginning to regenerate this year, some of them are experiencing some dieback in the branches, just a knock-on effect because of the drought that we had last year. But
yeah,
bring in samples.
I was going to add to that. I don't think the little red mites that you're seeing, they are not really the problem. Those are probably clover mites, and they're just a nuisance. But I agree with Robert. When you start to see that branching, that growth coming up low on the tree, it is definitely a sign of stress, but we would need to see samples to really determine what's causing the problem. But I don't think it's the mites, so I don't think you're going to need to be spraying or treating it. We just want to see a sample on that. So thanks for that call, and good luck with the tree. And we've got our next caller in here. Deb is calling in from Lusby, Maryland.
Hi, David. How are you? Glad to speak with you. I have a hibiscus tree in a whiskey barrel. It's the 3rd summer. Well, the first 2 years it was doing fabulous, and now the cicadas have just I don't know. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands of them around here in southern Maryland, and I wonder if the top of the tree is dying because of the cicadas or if it was because of the weather last year. Because initially it was wonderful until the cicadas came out, and now it's looking really ill.
Good point. Now, do you have cicadas out where you live, Robert?
I do, but strangely you go up to Reston, Herndon, not one sign of a cicada. So it's very patchy as to where they came out. Is it I take it a tropical hibiscus?
No, it is a perennial. It's a tree type of hibiscus.
Okay, so it's one of the Rosa Sharon, the Althea types.
Right, exactly,
okay,
Rosa Sharon.
Okay. It could be the cicadas. I mean, they do have sort of sap-sucking proboscis that come out. I think it's still a little too early for them to be laying eggs, although I have seen an increase in females buzzing around. I've got a feeling, though, during that period when they were beginning to emerge, we started hitting a patch of cold weather. So I don't know if that's playing into it as well. What's your thoughts?
Well, no, I have seen the egg laying start.
Okay.
I've seen that damage occur, but not to the point where it's causing a twig dieback on there.
Oh, no, it's about 1/3 of the top part of the bloom, and I was wondering if I should just cut it back or wait a little while.
No, I was going to tell you, I mean, I would probably just go ahead and trim it back. That's such a vigorous plant. You can prune it back, it will regrow, it will rebloom, and life will be just fine.
Oh, thank you, David. I'm so glad to see you this morning that I knew you know a little bit about trees, a lot more than I do.
Okay, well, thank you for the call, and good luck with your with that hibiscus. We're going to have to take a commercial break right now, but please stay with us because we've got more callers when we get back. Okay, we're going to get right back into our phone calls, and I think, Pat, you've been holding. Thanks for your patience. How can we help you?
Yes, I have 2 hibiscus bushes, trees, they're not trees, I guess, full of spider mites. And I was wondering if there's a natural way not to use pesticides to get rid of them.
Oh, wow, that's next week's topic. But we'll go ahead and take your question today. Right.
Definitely. I mean, horticultural oil, you suffocate out the predator. It's not a chemical, but it just coats the breathing pores on the back of the spider mites so they can't breathe anymore. You do have to repeat spray, though, because you want to be able to deal with the eggs as they hatch. It will only kill off the adults, so just tackling it that way. The other thing is just get your hose out every now and then and jet down the plant. That often washes them off, and they don't like the humidity around the plant, so they often move off at that point, too.
They're like covered over the buds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it. I've got an apple tree in my yard, and it is just covered with spider mite this year. It just seems to be one of those pests that got a foothold very early before I even expected to see them. So.
And what was the first thing you called it?
Horticultural oil is one of them.
Horticultural oil.
Yep. And you just basically mix that up with some water, or you can get it as a ready-to-use spray, spray it on, and get rid of your problem.
Okay, thank you.
Be consistent.
Okay, thanks, and good luck with that. And let's see, our next caller, I lost Cherry. Is that Susie? Are you holding out there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I just love your show.
Oh, well, thank you. We sure appreciate your watching and giving us a call today.
All right, I have a couple of questions. You were talking about the hot lip salvia. Mm-hmm. Isn't it a sage?
It is, yeah. The common name is sage, but the Latin name or the scientific name is salvia.
It is a salvia.
Yes.
Okay, and also this. I have a couple of Gora plants, mm-hmm. and seems like the rains have knocked all the blooms off. Should I prune that back, or just let it redevelop its buds, or what?
No, just prune them back. If the flower spikes have been damaged because of heavy rain, just cut them back, and they regenerate quite happily and come up for you, so that's not a problem.
Good. Oh, I love those 2 plants.
Excellent.
They winter over, and they're just gorgeous.
Yeah, and like I say, great for the pollinators, too, so
yes,
you're doing a good thing by having those.
Yes, and they, verbena. The trailing verbena,
yeah.
gorgeous, and that winter's over also.
Excellent.
Okay.
Oh, good. All right, well, thanks for your call, and good luck with bringing all those butterflies around.
Oh, I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, and let's see, and we've got time. We'll go to our next caller, who's Sabrina. I think calling in, again, was that with mole and vole questions. How are you doing today, Sabrina?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great.
Okay, I bought a house about 5 years ago, and I brought along a whole bunch of plants from my previous yard. I began to plant hostas, lilies, and other things, and I didn't know anything about moles and gophers beforehand, but whichever one, they are sucking the life out of the plants from the bottom, and then I have all these tiny little holes. So I was told I have both of those problems. Do you know what I can do to get rid of them. I've been buying granular stuff from Home Depot, Lowe's, etc., but I never get around to treating my entire yard, so it's still a problem.
Yeah, those can be really destructive, and they are difficult to manage. Have you found any good controls for voles?
You know, it's my nemesis. I have voles in my yard, and boy, do they cause some trouble, and you really have to stay on top of them. The castor oil, you know, whether it's a spray-on with the hose end connector, or you buy it as a granular and put it down that way, is one method. It works for some people, for other people it doesn't, but again, you have to be consistent with it to really make it work. But there are poisons, baits, things like that. I'm always reluctant to recommend those because other animals and wildlife can get to them and unfortunately get affected by it. But if you can put something down that will repel them, that's probably the safest and best way to try and tackle it.
Yeah, the other that I would add to that, Sabrina, is, now this doesn't help necessarily in hindsight, but the product Permatil, it's a stone, it's a natural product, and sometimes we'll put that around susceptible plants. Like if you're putting hosta in the garden, you can sort of line the planting hole with that Permatil, and that prevents them from getting in there. But otherwise, I agree with Robert, you're looking at traps, poisons, repellents, they all have their issues that surround that. So that's a tough one to deal with.
Okay, and can you just spell that word Permatil?
Yeah, it's called Permatil. It's a stone, but they put it in a kiln, so it's almost like lava rock, and it's coarse and it's gritty. Helps to enhance drainage, but then the voles don't like tunneling or burrowing through it.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Good. Well, Robert, thanks so much for being on with us today.
It's always a pleasure. It's a great opportunity to be able to teach them all. You know, apart from the seminars, this is the next way that we can reach out to people.
Right. Now, are you going to be out at Gainesville today?
I am, yep. Got to go straight back there and take care of all my plants.
Good. So I hope everybody stops by and says hi to Robert today and watches next week as we talk about natural pest controls.